7 members that were appointed by Troy City Council, and there's one that resigned. And we do have, I'll introduce him in a second, we do have an alternate here tonight. We also don't have 7 seated members of the board. So if you do have business before the board tonight, just be aware you do have the right to request a postponement of your agenda item to the next meeting. And that means if the next meeting doesn't have 7 seated members either, it's the same as tonight. But you do have a right to request to have a full board hear it. And the board doesn't have the requirement to grant it, but we've been very generous in the past to do that. So when we get to item 5A, it's on the shoulders of the petitioner to bring that up if they're interested in a postponement from tonight's agenda. With that, we do have 6 members seated tonight, so we are a quorum. We are able to operate legally and ethically on the agenda items here before us. So before we move on, we're going to have the roll call. Mr. Evans, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Clark.
I'm here.
Mr. Agawis. Mr. Desmond.
Here.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Here.
Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Mr. Kaltsunis.
Here.
So we do have a quorum, and we are proceeding forward. So for the benefit of the public seated in the gallery and those who are watching at home, either on cable or the internet, I'm just going to make some quick introductions. And so over here on the end is Mr. Kaltsunis, who is an alternate to this board, but for tonight's purposes, he will be a full voting member of the zoning board. And then next to him is Mr. Lambert. I'm Glenn Clark, the chairman of this board. This is Mr. Eisenbacher, Mr. Desmond, and Mr. McCauley. And those are the voting members of the board here tonight. On the side is Mr. Evans, who works daytime with his Superman cape. He works for the city of Troy, and he works in the area of planning and zoning, and for our purposes here tonight, he represents the city administration. He also services the board. And then at the very end over there is Mr. Motsney, who is during the day is an assistant city attorney for the city of Troy, and for our purposes tonight, he will be serving as our legal advisor. So at this point in time, I'd like to call on Mr. Lambert, who's going to read our rules and procedures. So the board does have certain rules and certain procedures that we operate on, and we don't violate those, and we just like to share them for anyone who's going to bring business before us. Mr. Lambert, could you please share?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As was alluded to, the Zoning Board of Appeals is a group of 7 of your neighbors appointed by City Council to decide on requests for variances and other matters that are brought before them. A variance is a relaxation of the literal provisions of the zoning ordinance. Petitioners must indicate a hardship or a practical difficulty with the land that would warrant the granting of the variance. For our procedure, the board will hear the items in the order they appear on the agenda. When an agenda item is called, the chairman will verify that the petitioner is present. Then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. The petitioner will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the action requested. After the petitioner makes their presentation and answers any questions that the board may have, the chairman will then open the public hearing. Any person wishing to speak on the request should raise their hand, and when recognized by the chairman, come up to the podium. The speaker should identify themselves with their name and address and indicate their relationship to the property in question. For example, a next-door neighbor or live behind the property, etc. They should then state whether they are in favor of or against the variance request and give their reasons for the opinion. Comments should be directed through the chairman. They should be kept as brief as possible and closely pertain to the matter under consideration. Only one person will be recognized by the chairman to speak at one time. At the conclusion of public comments, the chairman will then close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, no other public comment will be taken unless in response to a specific question by a member of the board. The board will then make a motion to approve, deny, or postpone the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes are needed. If the request is not granted, the applicant then has the right to appeal the board's decision to the Oakland County Circuit Court.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. So we move right on to item number 3, which is the approval of the minutes related to the December 18th meeting. Are there any questions or concerns by a member of the board about what was presented to us in our packet? Mr. Lambert.
I would move approval of the minutes.
There's a motion for approval, seconded by Eisenbacher. Is there any discussion? Seeing that there isn't any, Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Desmond.
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Mr. McCauley.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Mr. Kaltsunis.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes, motion carries. We move on to the approval of the agenda as presented. So this is for board members. If they see something on the agenda that they don't think should be there or want to add something, they can speak now. Is there anybody that would like to be heard? If not, the agenda is set for tonight's meeting. We move right on to item number 5A, which is related to 4947 Saddlebrook Court. Mr. Evans, can you please present to us on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a variance to allow an addition to a house to be set back from the rear property line less of a distance than what the ordinance requires. Now, this property is in a neighborhood south of south of Long Lake between John R. and Rochester. Specifically, it's located at 4947 Saddlebrook Court. It's on the west side of the road, as outlined in yellow on the overhead. All the properties you see in that slide are zoned single-family residential. That's a close-up of the property with Saddlebrook at the bottom. And what I've done is I've superimposed with a red square the area approximately of where the addition's going to go. Now there's their site plan, and the hatched area is the addition. Now this is a single-story addition. It's going to be a 3 or 4 season room, but they provided us elevations with height. We can see that it's 1 story. And going back a few slides, that addition is proposed to be just under 30 feet from the rear property line when completed, and the zoning ordinance requires that any additions to this house that have are buildings and have roofs be set back at least 40 feet from that back property line. So in order to proceed, they're seeking relief from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. So are there any questions or comments by a member of the board? Mr. Lambert.
Mr. Evans, are you able to kind of do a little indication on that overhead about where the setback would be on that proposed expansion of the home?
Yeah, let me draw in a. So you're saying where the setback would be?
Yeah, where it would cut through that one proposed addition.
Oh, the 40 feet?
Yeah.
Sure. So this figure here is 29.60, and this looks to be 13 feet. So I'm going to estimate it at about probably somewhere in there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else for city staff? Okay, we're going to call our petitioner forward. So if you can step up to the microphone and identify yourself and state for the record what your relationship to the property in question is.
Yes, my name is Chetan Patel, and I'm actually co-owner. My wife is the other co-owner.
Good evening.
And good evening.
Could you just identify yourself, please?
My name is Meera Patel.
Good evening.
So I would like to ask a variance to change it to 29.6. And I actually did the numbers. It's actually, right now, the way the house is built right now, I actually only have 2.6 feet room for expansion. But I'm going to kind of sit down with you guys, not sit down, but stand up and tell you why we need this. And so when we bought this house in 2009, it was actually just me and my wife only. And at that time, my parents were not living with us. But what happened was my parents, it's our culture to have our parents live with us. And at that time, they were not. They actually moved into our house a few years later. But at that time, actually behind us, there was actually a fence. On the side of us, a few months later, that neighbor on the south of us, he actually built a fence as well. So, and I have pictures of that to show you guys, right? And what we did is we actually planted arborvitaes along there, so, because we don't want to see a fence. But so recently, my parents are having health issues right now, and they're having a hard time going up and down the stairs. So what we decided, and my mother just received knee surgery a couple of years ago, and it's still not like how it was before, and she struggles to kind of go up and down the stairs. So this is where we kind of got the idea that maybe we need to do something for my parents so they could have a first floor bathroom for them. So one of the things we're doing is that we're actually converting our formal dining room into a first floor, like a master bedroom that's actually wheelchair accessible as well. And we're actually adding an extension to that, and that's where that extension is. And that's, as you can see, it's not that big. It's only 15 by 13, 195 square foot. And currently, our upstairs bathroom, we're thinking, upstairs bathroom, we actually have 2 girls as well. And it's kind of hard for all of us to use all that as well. So as you can see, I'm only asking pretty much, for extra 10 feet. And this is still under the 25, like it's under 25% of, I know you guys have a rule, only 30% of the lot can be covered by building. This is actually under 25% as well. So I think that's all I have to say. This is the hardship that we have right now, and I was hoping you guys could understand that and kind of give us a variance for this.
Thank you. Is there a member of the board who would like to inquire of this petitioner? Mr. Lambert?
Just to clarify, the addition is pretty much for a sunroom then, a 3/4 of the year sunroom, or exactly what's going to be used in that?
It is going to be used as a bedroom.
Bedroom, okay. All right.
Yeah, full bedroom.
All right, thank you.
Yes, and I do have actually signatures of my immediate neighbors saying they approve this as well. And I actually do have pictures showing that right now we actually have fences on that side, on both sides, and arborvitaes as well. Should I pass?
So, yeah, if you can hand them to Mr. Kalsunas, and we'll all look at them, and then they'll be deposited with the city staff for the public record.
And the signatures are actually...
Yeah, please hold your comments to at the microphone. Okay.
The signature actually of neighbors that are actually on south side, right? Immediate neighbors on south and the north as well.
Okay, thank you. Is there a member of the board for this petitioner? Okay, if you could have a seat, please. Thank you very much. So at this point in time, we are going to open the public hearing on this matter. And if you're here to address the board, please step to the microphone and be identified. And be recognized. You'll have to identify yourself. Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak to the board on this matter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll
Could you
take this
identify yourself
opportunity.
here, please?
I'm Manish Patel. I'm a resident on 4934 Sadabuk Road, actually neighbor to Chetan. And I would like to speak in support of Chetan's addition to the house. I've seen his parents move in from Plymouth because of aging, and probably he is in need of having a first floor bedroom so he can care for them. So this is his request to the city. We did reach out to all the residents on the street. Actually, I serve as the HOA treasurer, and we did recorded no objection from any of the members who live on that particular street. So I request this city council to approve this zoning variance. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else who'd like to be recognized to address the board on this matter? If you'd like to be address the board on item 5A, please step to the podium. Seeing that there isn't any, we'll close the public hearing out and bring this back to the board's attention.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Evans.
And one thing that didn't get into your packet, we did receive an email earlier last week, and it's posted on the screen at the bottom. A proposed addition at 4947 Saddlebrook should be restricted to a 3-season porch that is less than 1 story high. We did ask the individual if they wanted to provide their name and address, but they did not.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other communications on this matter? Mr. Evans, Mr. Lambert, could you?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, it's being passed on. The only communications we have are the 3 petitions by neighbors in favor of the variance.
And the email that we just saw on the screen.
That was one.
so I will ask my colleagues if someone would like to be recognized on this matter. Mr. McCauley.
I did my homework on this a little bit because I'm familiar with the area, and when I looked at what this was zoned, and I looked at the size of the lot, and I said, no way does this lot fit that size for the zoning. It's really small. So I was looking at the practical difficulty. Is the size of the lot restricted them more than anything else? I found that this was originally zoned CR1, which is a smaller zone development. That changed in 2011 to what we currently know. And I wanted to know whether if this would fit in the old zoning that it had before. And the front was 25 and the back was 35 feet, so it would still not fit in the original zoning when that house was built and originally designated. I didn't want to see our new zoning ordinance hinder them in some way, and it doesn't. It's consistent still where it wouldn't have fit in the original zoning. These yards are small, and I struggle with putting something in there that size onto something like that. And like I said, I wanted to make sure rules didn't change on them and hinder them. And they did change, but it does not hinder them. It's still the same issues that they would have if they wanted to build back on the old zoning ordinances.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. Would anyone else like to be recognized?
I'll go for it.
Mr. Desmond.
Well, first off, I appreciate the position that you guys are in and the need to care for the parent. The problem for me that I'm seeing is when we actually structure motions to approve things, it's based on calling out an element to the practical difficulty and saying, based on this, we can grant a variance. And the downside is that all of those things that we've heard are of what we call a personal nature. They're not tied to the property. And that makes it administratively, regardless of how much I want to say yes, there's no mechanism by which I can point at one of these elements and say, yes, it meets this criteria, and for that reason, I can vote yes on a variance for this, because the reality is that these are all they're intrinsic to your family. That's the personal component. It's not an element of the land. If this property was shaped in a bizarre way that made it so well, my neighbor, they have a regular parcel and they can put, they can use their full space, but I can't because mine pizza shaped or something. Like there's a difference in the lot. It's an irregular lot. That's something that we could point to. But with this, it's a box. It's a square box that is not irregular, I haven't heard a hardship within the practical difficulty criteria that's outlaid for us that I can point at and say, here's a variance based on, I move for a variance based on that, because I haven't heard it. Within the statement of practical difficulty, there's 5 criteria, and within everything that we've heard, none of those things attach to any one of those 5 criteria that I can hear. At least that's my seeing of it. So, I mean, regardless of what I personally want to do, I don't have a administrative way to do that or a bureaucratic way to do that in a motion. So that's what I'm seeing. It's the problem that I'm encountering here. So,
thank you, Mr. Desmond. I too just have difficulty when good and decent people want to take care of their elderly parents. That's a wonderful thing. I am involved in the care for my 100 and almost 101-year-old grandmother, and I just adore people who love their parents and want to take care of them, and their grandparents and so forth. It's humanity at its best. The problem is when someone says, well, this is our culture for them to live with us. Well, what if somebody else's culture is, well, both sets of parents need to live with us, and it's zoned, and I'm sure if I ask Mr. Evans over here, it's zoned as single-family detached home. Single family means one immediate family that's like husband, wife, mom, dad, and their immediate offsprings, not cousins, not going up the ladder as far as parents. So what if somebody wanted to have both sets of parents, so that we're having 3 sets of adults living in a house, and then the next person comes along and says, well, for this set, we need this addition, and for these other parents, we need this addition. That's why we have zoning to identify this is the customary norm for living in this particular zoning district in a particular subdivision. So I just have a very difficult time. And then what happens if, some, member of the family dies and they have children that need to be taken care of? Well, then, are we to break the zoning ordinance to add on a 3rd edition to house all these extra children above and beyond what that immediate couple's offspring are? So I think there has to be rhyme and reason here, and I really do agree with Mr. McCauley's assessment, because there's not a lot of space there, and to build where it's saying that, the gentleman said he could only build so much. This board is regularly dealing with homes that are built out to the max of really what they can do, and then when there's a want that comes along in an improved economy where you have the cash for it, we are hearing these requests regularly now, and it's good for the local construction company and the architectural, for all that. And I love the fact putting people back to work, and making sure people are doing well in our local Troy economy. But once again, there's a set of rules here, and I think I can't see a pathway forward, to Mr. Desmond's point as well. Is there another member of the board who'd like to be recognized?
I have one quick question, city staff. Do you have a lot size for what this property is? I'm not actually seeing that in here.
I know that's wrong.
What the footage is? I don't see it in the public record either.
I can look that up.
I did earlier at home.
It'll be just a minute.
Because it is a very small, it seems to be a pretty small lot, and within at least the first statement of practical difficulty under Section A, exceptional narrowness, shallowness, smallness, and I'm curious as exactly how small that is in relation to an average lot.
Okay, so this lot is 102 deep by 75 wide. And it does appear the lot to the north, the lot across the street to the east, the lot to the northeast are identical dimensions. And I'll put an overhead up there in a minute. It's kind of hard to read these dimensions. So
Relative to the neighboring properties, it's not exceptionally small.
Right.
It actually looks like the properties south of it are even smaller because of the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, those look to be about 85 wide in the back, 83, and other than the cul-de-sac necking down, or widening out, I should say, they're also about 102 deep. See if we can see on the overhead here just the dimension. Yeah, they're hard to read.
Yeah.
Even I'm having trouble at my desk reading those, but that's what they are. So we've got a handful of similarly, virtually identical size parcels on that street, with the exception of the cul-de-sac lots. And of course, you've got your empty lots that are supposed to remain vacant as part of the cluster zoning there, the original approval.
All right, thank you.
Would anyone else like to be recognized on the board? Mr. Lambert.
Just a clarification by staff. Mr. Evans, you said that's a quote-unquote a cluster development, so those 2 parcels at the north end there were kept open as green space in order to grant the developer density bonus on that site?
I don't know if it was a density bonus necessarily, but I know that under the old cluster ordinance, that there were density limits. So they would be allowed to have smaller lots that are closer to each other, but as a trade-off, you've got to offer some open space. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of property on this site that have no development, and actually in looking at how it was developed, you can kind of see why the couple of these parcels at the south end, you just couldn't fit a house in anyway, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just
Johnson?
a point of clarification. A single family, as defined by the ordinance, would include the parents of somebody, would still be part of one family, because if they're related by consanguinity, a hard word to say, a legal term, it's still one family. So parents could live with their children and it would not violate the single-family zoning. So just for point of clarification.
But what if there are 3 generations in that house?
Technically, it would still be, if they're all related, would.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a lot of case law about that years ago, and that's why the definition has changed. But
Gotcha.
yeah.
Is there a member of the board who'd like to be recognized? Mr. Kalsunas?
I understand it's having a parent, old parent living in the house. Some cultures they like to keep the people in the house. They don't throw them in the old age homes, and I understand the neighbors, they have no objections on this issue. And I think it's it's a necessity for the people to have them over there. So I think I'm in favor to grant the variance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other member of the board? Would anyone like to be recognized? Mr. McGauley?
I'd like to make a motion for the variance to allow the proposed addition to the rear setback for 4947 Saddlebrook be denied.
Is it denied?
There's a motion to reject the petitioner's request. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. We have an active motion before the board now. And is there any discussion by a member of the board? Seeing that there isn't anyone who would like to be recognized, Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote, reminding my colleagues that a yes vote is to deny the petitioner's request. A no vote is to bring it back to the board table for further discussion or other possible action. Mr. Evans?
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Reluctantly, yes.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
No.
Mr. Kaltsunas?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes. So the petitioner's request has been rejected, and we are moving on to item number 6, communications. I see, Mr. Evans, we don't have, it says none, so there's nothing to talk about, correct?
Correct.
Great. And item number 7, miscellaneous business, none. Anything new since this was printed?
No.
Okay, excellent. And now we're going to open for public comment. Any comment that a member of the public would like to address the board on, please step to the podium and be recognized. If you'd like to address the board on any matter, please step to the podium and be recognized. If you'd like to address the board on any matter, please step to the podium and be recognized. We can't interact with you, so whatever you're going to say is going on the public record.
Okay.
Okay? So
It doesn't change anything?
we've already voted.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say, I think the lot was already small when we purchased it, so that's a difficulty. Personal nature, I do feel that that may be something that the board could review on, because a lot of the viewings that I've seen in the past, they kind of are personal nature. Everybody that presents here, it's a personal nature. So I think maybe that needs to be a little bit reviewed, because when my husband and I were reviewing this, that was a point that we struggled with. Because just because it's going on record, I think a lot of folks that kind of come up here for adding a sunroof or sunroom or whatever, bottom line is personal nature. So just a suggestion, or maybe somebody that could kind of review that and maybe put that in better terms so the public can kind of understand. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the board on any matter? Please step to the podium and be recognized. So we'll close out the public comment. We are completed with our official business. Is there a member of the board who has anything else that they'd like to bring forward without having said it beforehand? So we are adjourned to February. Have a very good night, everybody.